Newly podcast where you get practical, no BS insights on how to grow yourself and grow your career. Happy Thursday morning, everyone. Welcome from the inside of my closet. It's been a bit of a morning, so I appreciate all of your help and support today. I am here and
Mm.
joined by the lovely Virginia
Aw,
James. Thank you
thank
so much for joining me. Welcome.
thank you. Yeah, it's good to be here, and I'm sorry that you had a morning, you know?
It's
We're
all
good.
right. Yeah, we're moving with it. So why don't
Yeah.
you just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So, long story short, I have, my background is a mixed bag. Okay, it was never one straight path, so to speak, and so it involves like social work, nonprofit, academia, and now business,
Mm.
and I really am one of those like kind of type A go getters, and I just had to find my path eventually with FSW. So that's some of my background, and I've been doing FSW now, at least on paper, since 2019, and it launched online in 2020, and then the pandemic hit, like
Oh,
other businesses. So it was like, oh, awesome, this is great timing. So it's just
yeah.
been a funny roller coaster ride from there. Hmm.
Well, thanks so much for that.
Yeah.
I don't know what FSW is. What is that?
Oh, sorry. Feminine Sage Wisdom. That's
Yes,
my business name. Yep.
yes.
Yeah. I just
We
always
love that.
shorthand it. Lots
Okay.
of vowels.
Yes, it's wonderful. It's such an exciting business, and I'm so excited to hear more about it as we talk through your career journey and talk through how to navigate the WTFs of career transition.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so you told us a little bit about yourself, kind of where
Mhm.
you've been. Tell us about just a little bit more in depth your A to B story. So how tell us
Mm.
about that transition to FSW and how you got there.
Yeah. So my journey has been, as usual, very organic. And,
Mm.
when we're in our 20s, I'm in my 30s now. So when we're in our 20s, we have to have that plan, right? We have to know what we're doing every 5 to 10 years, and we have to go get it, damn it. Wait, can I swear, Britta? Is
Oh,
that cool? Okay.
yeah, you can say that, but
Okay.
probably not the F word.
Okay. All right, great. Good for me to know, and I'm
Yeah,
gonna try to not do
I
that.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. So basically, my story is that, really some of the biggest pivots in my life, we'll say that, okay? So, let's say every 2 years, I tend to jump ship, because I hit the parameters of the job. I hit, whether it's management, leadership, or the role, I'm just, frankly, kind of bored with it, and
Mm,
I can't grow beyond there. So, it'd be like every couple years. Then I was in academia, and I also started a PhD program at the same time. So, I worked in student affairs and did PhD program, both full-time.
wow. Oh,
So
that's
let's say I
wow.
burned out in 2017, but also I actually recognized I didn't like sociology. So
Mm.
if you're gonna recognize that, do it early, like only around those classes times, not while you're like ABD and beyond. So I did have that moment of oh bleep, there you go,
Yeah.
and and went oh my god, this is crappy,
Yeah.
and so that was a really big pivot. And what
Mm.
happened there is I was like, fine, let me go back to my first love in history. So I that's another story, Britta. But then came out to Washington State for another master's. And I'm my MSW, or master's of social work, long time ago. So not my first rodeo. So anyway, moving to Washington State, working for nonprofit for part-time while doing school again. And in that situation, I think it was, like, that last thing that made me recognize I wanna start my own business. Now, I
Oh,
never had that entrepreneurial thing in me at 12 with the lemonade stand, like, "I'm gonna freaking be my own woman, and do this."
yeah.
So, again, it unfolded, and, that's really how life has been, and unexpected twists and turns, sometimes like a 2 by 4, sometimes by choice, and so that's how FSW came to be, but it really took a couple pivotal moments of me going, is this really a fit or not? And
Mm,
and that took some deep excavating work and reflection. So,
mm.
yeah, so that's a little bit more of the A to B. Did I answer that question okay for you?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I liked the depth that you went into, and recognizing that it's been more of an organic transition and you've
Mhm.
noticed that as you've hit sort of a level in certain careers that there was sort of this something you were coming up against, realizing that
Yeah.
you weren't able to reach a growth goal. And I think that's
Mhm.
so important and indicative of, the importance of self-reflection. So as we
Mhm.
dive into the topic, how to
Yeah,
navigate the WTFs of your career
yeah.
transition or career,
Mhm.
um, could you talk a little bit about self-reflection and how that's played a role in how you've navigated that for yourself and obviously
Mhm.
for others with FSW?
Yeah, yeah. So, like, I think one thing I will say, I should say on the front end, Britta, is that, we all like do our strengths finder, strengths quest, right? So learner is my top one. And
Mhm.
so that is, if I could be a professional student, I would be, right? If I could get really paid decently for that, I would be, maybe not bio 101, but like history or other things, gender studies. And so I have always had this since, childhood, this aspect of me that wanted to always learn, grow, and expand. And so that's where my self-reflection comes from. And
Mhm.
sometimes that self-reflection can be really challenging
Mhm.
because and maybe this kind of falls more into those career what the Fs, right? But like, really like when we start a job or we start an experience personally or professionally, and we start saying, "Oh my god, this is so good for me. This is gonna be the greatest." And then you're in it and you're like, "Whoa, this what? Where'd that come from? That wasn't
Mhm.
in the interview."
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
did not discern that very well, or I did, or they, said things a certain way, or unpacked it a certain way. So, I think that self-reflection is a continual process. I
Mhm.
do it daily. And but there's also this twist, you don't wanna overthink. You don't
Mhm.
wanna overindulge in that, it may be a belittling process or that inner conflict where you feel like a piece of crap either, right? So there's kind of a balance to it. So self-reflection is that daily practice like meditation, mindfulness. It's
Mhm.
something I say, I even have a spot in my kitchen, where I make my tea and I'm like, okay, if I'm having a moment, what the hell do I need to do right now? And what's happening here and unpacking that and always asking questions. And then in the spinoff for those I work with or those I just have in my network like you, it's just like even in these online social spaces, I am an old soul, but I
Mhm.
know that there's power in self-reflection here, and
Mhm.
there is power in self-reflection together. And so it isn't just a silo of individuality, but collectively we could all start, well, let us light workers or whatever you want to call us, we're trying to, come together collectively, but we all need to cater to that to the best of our ability. Mhm.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think what's so interesting too about what you're saying is, one, I wanted to touch on the fact that you talked about not beating yourself up. I think
Mhm.
sometimes when we get into a space or a place and we realize, oh crap, this is not for me. I don't know about anybody else, but at least for me, usually one of the first places I go is, oh, you idiot, how did you not know? And
Totally.
you know,
You didn't read
beating
the room, man.
myself
Come on.
up.
Yeah.
What would you just say to someone that does that or experiences that? How would you frame it for them?
Yeah, so what I would tee it up as is we'll just say professionally, right, for our work and the
Yeah,
careers
yeah.
that we do or
Mhm,
the jobs
mhm.
that we do.
Yeah.
I would say too is like in that interview process, you're never gonna know everything. You're never
Mm,
gonna know. Maybe
mhm,
unless you've worked for them before, okay, and then you have a history there. Because 'cause I've done that too. Like, I bounced to a previous job once for
mhm.
various reasons. But like in an interview process, you have to forgive yourself for maybe not asking the one question that you think of at 2 in the morning later and go,
Yeah,
"Shit, shit."
yeah, yeah,
That would have been a good one,
yeah. Mhm,
so self-forgiveness is huge, but
mhm.
also I do believe, and this is this like one of my mottos is like use your evolution for your career revolution. So what I
Ooh,
look yeah, yeah, thank you. So
I
like
like
how I
that.
look at that is we are always evolving as human beings, as beings on this planet in this
Mhm,
lifetime. And so when you remember, like in the next interview, if you go do another job, you say, "Oh, frick, that's a good question. I
Mhm.
forgot that one before,
Mm,
or even as women or those of us who identify as women, salary negotiation, not easy,
mm.
right? What are
Yeah.
those benefits negotiations? What are those things? And so the point is we keep building on our strengths and our knowledge and go, okay, I need to remember to talk about this. And even for the things that we've done well, I need to remember to talk about this.
Mhm.
And so I don't see it as, a complete loss.
Mhm.
And like if you have a very good, hopefully, mentoring supervisor relationship where it's safe, right, or a good team, then you can pose those questions later and
Mm.
continue to develop your knowledge in that space.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think I love this idea of that can you say it the evolution? What was that phrase? I
Oh,
love
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, so it's use your evolution to start your career revolution. Yeah.
Yes, use your
Mhm.
evolution to start your career revolution. I love that on so many levels because
Yeah.
it speaks to the idea that it's not well we're not one trick ponies. We're not we have I think there's this idea when we start a career that like there's a plan A and a plan B and we can only do one of those
Right,
two things and like
right.
if we divert from anything then we're
Mhm.
somehow flaky or something like that
Right, right, or we
I
screwed up somehow, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I was, I think I changed my major a bunch of times, but
Mhm.
I remember every time I did that, there was like almost a sense of shame, like, oh, I'm wishy-washy or something. But that's
Yeah,
recognizing like that's how we learn. That's how our brains are made to learn in that way. That
yeah,
we test something out and it doesn't quite
yeah.
work, and then we test something else out and it doesn't quite work. And
Mhm, mhm,
I love that you speak to that point. And then the other thing I loved that you said about questions is that,
mhm.
you can always one, you can always self-reflect beforehand, like, what is it that I really want to know? And one of the
Yeah.
questions I always ask an employer now is,
Mhm,
how do you deal with conflict? For me, that is so important. Like, how is conflict handled in your organization?
mhm.
And, if they bluster at that question, I know that they are not interested in growing people in their organization because
Mhm.
conflict is a part of growth. So,
Right. Absolute and it
what would
happens in
you
a
say to
team,
that?
you know what
What
I
would
mean? Oh,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, what would
Yeah.
you say to that? Like, what would be questions that you would ask, and what would you say to what I just said?
Yeah, I think the conflict question is very valid, and we all have different ways of saying it,
Mhm.
right? Like or gosh, I have to it's been so long since I've actually had an interview, Britta. I actually have to think about that. What did I ask in my last interviews?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I do identify as queer or part of the LGBTQ plus family, right? So my
Right.
question is always, how do you support, LGBT employees?
Fantastic.
And how they react to that is huge. And
Mm.
if
Mhm.
I don't absolutely have to have that paycheck, I'm not gonna work with them
Yeah.
depending upon how
Mhm.
they answer, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
also would be a question is like, what's on your heart song? Like, what do you care about deeply? Children,
Mhm.
welfare, animals,
Mhm.
whatever. How do even some companies these days are looking at sustainability policies, right?
Yeah.
How do they look at climate change or something like that, right?
Mhm.
So, like,
Mhm.
that would be if that is a value to you, that's kind of a make or break kind of value, I'd ask that question,
Yeah.
right? And obviously, salary and benefits is huge, especially with the economy right now. But
Mhm. Mhm.
even, disability or policies surrounding, like, what if something happens? How do they support their people? And those are kind of some basics, but I think, like, in other ways gosh, let me think. I think that toxic work culture you don't have to say it that way in the interview process, but,
You guys have
uh,
a toxic work culture.
how toxic are you? Let's have a chat. But, like, there's gotta be a way to neutrally, but in a very, pointed way, specific way, inquire about that
Mhm.
because,
Mhm.
and I would also ask something too about their layoff policies. How do you
Mm.
let people know? Because we've seen on LinkedIn, people just get a freaking phone call or text or email, like,
Mm.
or
Or they're
nothing.
locked out of their computer
They're
and
just
nobody's told
locked
them
out.
anything. Yeah, just
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I would just kind of identify the safety that's what I call it in my work, but, like, a safety net. What is your safety net? What does
Mhm.
that involve? And
Mhm.
then ask questions surrounding that, and there's nothing wrong with asking questions. It's a
Mhm.
very good thing to do on the front end. You're
Mhm.
not gonna piss anyone off, you're not gonna, you know,
Well, and if you do, that tells you something about that place, you
right.
know? Mhm.
Right, totally,
Mhm.
yeah, and even on the front end and that's something I'll spin off of real quick, Britta, is, like, even on all web pages for any company, you still might not know everything.
Right.
So even though you might be diligent in your research beforehand, you might have the right questions, there's still going to be something that kinda slips through the cracks a little bit. So and then
Mhm.
you get to decide, do I stick with it or do I not,
Mhm.
in time.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're totally right. There is always something that slips through the cracks,
Mhm.
and I think the benefit of the fact that we evolve as humans, like we're talking about, is
Mm,
that we can start to recognize things that are beneficial for us and things that aren't, and we don't have to stick with what is not. And
mhm,
what would you say to somebody who is in a career that they like, but they're not at a company that they like? What would you say to them,
mm.
to think how they would think about their evolution and navigating that, like, WTF moment?
Yeah, 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 I think that what my recommendation would be there is sit with the strengths and experiences that you've built in the role. What do you
Mhm.
love about it? And, like, and be daydreamy, there's
Yeah.
no shame in daydreaming,
Mhm. Mhm.
and really unpack, self-reflect, really dig into what very specifically do you love about the role? Do you
Yeah.
love the time you show up for work? Do you love your salary and benefits? Do you love the people that you work with? Do you love the projects that you work on? And now if it's
Mhm.
all of that, great.
Mhm. Mhm.
Great. So then is it leadership or management that you have a problem with at the company or their sustainability policies or what is it, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say, like, I've always looked by accident, Britta, at lateral positions, but I also wanted a ladder at some point, but
Yeah.
it's funny how life happened where it was always just, like, same salary, same level, right? It
Mhm.
wasn't management, but it wasn't, like, down here, no
Mhm.
offense,
Mhm.
so it was,
Yeah.
like, always in this middle ground as
Yeah.
I look back on that. And
Mhm.
so, like, if you care deeply about, like, connecting people to their resources, then continue to look at work, and it doesn't have to be in the same field, right? It can
Mhm.
be in a lateral field or a first cousin field, right? Or
Mhm.
something like
Mhm.
that, or for those of us who are multi-passionate, so to speak, like,
Yeah.
how do we navigate that? We shimmy a little. We just
Yeah.
shimmy. We don't have to bump up 5 things. We can just shimmy and get into a company that we really care about, then maybe shimmy up if that's
Mhm.
what we care about.
Right.
So, yeah, I but it takes that reflection, it takes unpacking, and I would also say network with those people who have similar skill sets or
Mhm.
are at the company you wanna be at, be have coffee chats with them, have, a little friend dates with them and figure out, do you wanna be at that company,
Right. Yeah.
right? Like, all that homework on the front end is very valuable if you have the time for it. Mhm.
Yeah, and I would say I think you're totally right about that homework on the front end. I would say don't wait. If you're starting to question your career right now, don't
Mhm.
wait until you get to that desperate moment. Start
Right.
looking, there's nothing wrong with
Mhm.
looking. Start looking,
Yeah.
start exploring, like you said, start dreaming, start planning.
Mhm.
And that way when you get to a moment where you're like, I really can't take it anymore,
Yep.
you have options and you're headed in a direction, or you at least know, like, have a point on the horizon that you're headed for. Um,
Mhm,
I
mhm.
think that's
Yeah.
been so important to me. So, in talking about self-reflection, what are
Mhm.
some tools? So let's say somebody's like, "Okay, I don't
Mhm.
really know what I wanna do next. I know I like
Mhm.
sort of these things. I'm not really
Yeah.
sure what my strengths are."
Mhm.
What are some tools that you've given clients to be able to, explore their strengths or start to
Mhm.
understand what types of roles they would be good in?
Yeah, yeah. So what I've done, and yeah, this admittedly in my program, but basically, it's what I show them or help them with is this aspect of past, present possibilities. Because I
Mm,
know a lot of times we're always looking ahead. We're always looking ahead. But sometimes, frankly, we got some stuff in the past, or right going on right now that we need to also reflect on, contend with
mhm,
because
mhm,
it might be holding us back a little bit, whether we consciously know it or not,
mhm,
okay?
mhm.
And so, what it is like varying assignments and little homeworky things, but like some of
Yeah.
the key ones that I'm incredibly proud of is, looking at your past and where you've had those strengths and those resilience, especially through really tough things. Now,
Mm.
you have to be in the right headspace and heart space to look at that kind of stuff. You have to be having a good day, not a shitty day.
Yeah,
Um, but
fair
but
enough.
ultimately unpacking some of that and say, you know what? I forgot about that life event. I freaking
Mm,
rocked it. It was stressful AF. but I
Mhm.
made it.
Yeah.
How did I make that happen? Make it
Mhm.
happen, you know what I mean? How did I
Mhm.
get through that?
Yeah.
And so, that's one of my key things. And then also looking, I mean, we can all talk about this in like this self-development space or personal development space, but your wellness wheel as well. Just Google that,
Yeah.
figure that out
Wellness.
and say, how is this role serving me or not in every
Mhm.
aspect of this,
Yeah.
of this lifetime?
Mhm.
And where I'm at right now. And then one of my favorite assignments, I don't wanna talk about it too much because it would give it away, but one of my favorite assignments is taking your resume or CV and unpacking the hell out of it. And we're talking like
Ooh.
color coding and, and
Ooh.
just really like, what are those things that made you feel joy? What are
Yeah.
those things that burned you out? And if
Mhm.
you see patterns, I think like that's one of my things I'm nerdy about. When you see patterns from essentially birth to now,
Mhm.
don't discard those,
Yeah.
right? Don't discard those, we don't wanna be flippant about that because that kinda stuff matters, and it's
Yeah.
not to pigeonhole ourselves or say, "Oh, we have to stay in this little pattern box," or
Mm.
not, but, like, acknowledging that we have some of these ways about us that are
Mhm.
powerful,
Mhm.
strengths-based, intuitive,
Mhm.
and there's breadcrumbs throughout our entire life with that, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so those are some of that, and then at the end, it's like, goal planning, because you
Mhm.
have to break that down,
Right.
and I bring in I call it a certain thing in the program, but I bring in celebration too, because,
Ooh.
even for those I've seen on LinkedIn or you've, seen it too, is like when some people are like, "Oh my god, I've done 85 applications," and they're feeling exhausted and they're tired in the process,
Mm.
and I know though if you're short on money, it is not easy to go, like, reward yourself with a spa day. I get it,
Yeah.
okay. But are there any free things you can do that just make you feel better, like nature
Mhm.
bathing or,
Yeah.
hanging with your dog, or whatever, just to say, "You know what? I did good. I really did
Mhm.
good," because
Mhm.
we have to keep that up too. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so those are some of that's a little high level, but I think, like, whatever one or an individual can do to have clarity
Mm.
is key, and
Mm.
you might find clarity differently than I might find clarity,
Yeah.
right? I do it maybe through writing and meditation and journaling. Some people need to go for a jog just to
Yeah.
get their headspace or, like, take a shower. You know how many of us take a shower and we're like, "Oh my god, that's brilliant."
That idea,
You know?
just like
Shit.
yeah.
Oh, that's genius. I'm gonna go write that down?
I love
So,
that.
like, those spaces where we can find clarity. And also finally, sorry, and the last thing is, I call it getting your care team, right? So
Mm.
like, for the people in our lives who can say, well, what about this? And not where you get too many cooks in the kitchen, but
Mhm.
somebody, and we've talked about this before, but somebody who's maybe a couple steps ahead of you. They're
Mhm.
doing it, they're in that role, or they're in the company that matters, or they
Mm.
have better work-life balance, or whatever you want to call it, because I know people like different language. How are they doing it? Learn
Yeah.
from them and then get them on your care team, even just a monthly chit chat so you feel a little bit more bolstered,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, so those are some of the recommendations that I make, if that's all good there, unless you have more questions too, Britta. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think those recommendations are great. You're making me wanna join your FSW
Oh,
program
thanks
just
so
to,
much.
unpack
Yeah.
my resume. I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
sounds cool."
It's like my favorite module, I'm not gonna lie, but I like
Yeah.
color coding and highlighting, all that kind of crap. I'm super, like, I'm nerdy like that, but yeah, it's fun, and it's real, it's raw
Mhm.
too.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think what's exciting to me about all of this self-reflection is that it's not just in service of your career, it's in service of your life in general. Like
Right.
what is making
Yes.
you a whole person and
Beautifully
that your
said.
career is one aspect of that, but it really is
Mhm.
about this wholeness that you're thinking about. I really
Mhm.
love that.
Mhm.
I think for me, one of the tools that's been really great in self-reflection has been well, I mean, you have like the Myers-Briggs that can always
Yeah.
tell you something. You have
Mhm.
um, strengths finders like you've
Yeah.
talked about. Um,
Human design,
Human
or
design has been
yeah.
yes, all
Mhm.
of these tools can give you a little picture. And I think for me, one of the most exciting things that I've discovered about myself over the
Mhm.
last little bit in self-reflection is that I'm really great at quick starting. And if I
Oh.
surround myself with people that are sustainers, those people,
Mhm.
then I can quick start these great ideas and hand them off and watch people run with them. And
Perfect.
I used to think that that was a flaw of mine. That was a deep flaw
No.
that I couldn't like do something for 20 years, but I could do something really well or like start an idea that would
Mhm.
take most people a really long time to start. I could start it in a month and a half and then
Mhm.
and I
You're
think
like the spark, like, in the
yeah,
flame. You're like the you get the fire started, and then you're like, "Okay," handing it
yeah.
off. Mhm.
I
Yeah.
love that too. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I love sparking things in other people, which is part of one of the
Mhm.
reasons why I love this podcast,
Yeah.
sparking inspiration for people to build the career that they want and the career
Mhm.
that they
Mhm.
love. Um,
Yeah.
but I think too, what's so cool about what you said is that everybody does self-reflection in a different way. So,
Yeah.
like, if meditation I know there's a professional that I follow
Mhm.
here on LinkedIn, and she talks about how meditation just doesn't work for her, and
Yep.
she's tried and it just doesn't work,
Mhm.
but it does work.
Mhm.
Baking works great.
Right. And
And
yummy.
right,
Mhm.
delicious.
Yes.
And so, like, yeah, don't try to yeah, there are these self-reflection tools that a lot of people
Mhm.
have used, but if that doesn't work for you,
Mhm.
throw it out the window, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Well, and I think too is like I've been meditating for years, for I don't even know how long, for a very, very long time, like at least over 10 years.
Yeah.
And you know what though? A week ago, my headspace was so full and I was so preoccupied, it didn't work. So
Mm,
guess what I did? I breathed.
there you
I
go.
was like, awesome. I'm gonna keep breathing.
Yeah,
So here we are.
yeah,
And so like, when meditation isn't somebody's cup of tea, like mindfulness activities, that's like my next go-to, right?
yeah, yeah.
Or creativity. When
Mhm,
you get lost in a project or
mhm,
something,
mhm.
or whether it's gardening or knitting, or I'm talking about my own hobbies, but you know what I
Yeah,
mean, reading,
yeah,
that's fine.
yeah,
And so I think like you have to find what works for you. And there is absolutely no judgment. When there are 8 freaking billion people on this planet, we're all gonna do something a little different. And
right.
that's okay. It's
Yeah,
not one size fits all.
yeah.
And same with career too,
Mhm,
right? I think I'm so grateful that you've discovered that you're more the spark versus the continual bonfire. Not
right.
that you're not part of it, you're
Mhm,
part of that process. It wouldn't happen without you,
mhm,
right? And
mhm.
so big credit to you, Britta,
Yeah,
for being that.
yeah,
And I think we're kinda similar because I'm the spark, I'm like, "Let's do this, let's plan it, let's delegate it," but, like, sustaining, I'm like, "Eh, I'm bored. You have fun. You do this for 3 more years, okay,
yeah,
see you on the
yeah.
way out." But, I'm a huge ideas person. I'm like
Mhm.
that visual person, I'm the inspire I don't wanna say influencer, that's a loaded word these days, but,
Ooh,
like,
yeah,
inspirer, like, "It's gonna be okay." So
yeah.
it took a lot of time to say, "It's okay to be that way,"
Mhm,
and
mhm.
delegate the rest if
Yeah,
possible, whether it's on
yeah.
a team or say you're in business for yourself, find a VA who's really good at,
Mhm.
maybe helping out, like, when or you just do it for now, and then you find that help that can
Yeah,
help you with that, so in
yeah.
that process. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love the idea of just embracing the strengths
Yeah.
and being able to go from there and, not shaming yourself for those things. So
Mhm.
so we're kinda coming to the end of our time,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
wanna be
Mhm.
respectful of your time and everyone's time who's watching this, but
Mhm.
I if there's just, one thing that people could take away from,
Mm.
they have a WTF moment in their career and they know they need to
Mhm.
pivot, what's the one thing that you would tell them to start doing or to do?
Yeah, and I know this is my motto and my phrase other than the evolution one, but I really deeply 110% in my bones feel that your wisdom is within, and
Mm,
when you feel all freaking spirally, 'cause I'm there too, I've been there, I do get there, I'm a human being in a spiritual experience, blah, 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 blah,
mhm.
yada, yada, but, like, when you feel like you're spiraling with all the "what the
Yeah,
bleeps,
yeah.
like, and you feel, like, really out of control in it and spun up, which we've all been there. Just find that moment, find those seconds, find those minutes, if you can, an hour, in that meditation, mindfulness, centering, whatever groundedness means to you, baking, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
come back, and whether it's a mantra, whether it's an affirmation, but I breathe in and I embody my wisdom is within.
Mm,
This is
mhm.
gonna work itself out because guess what? In my case anyway, I've survived a shit ton in this lifetime. So
Nice.
guess what? I'm
Yeah,
gonna survive this.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
gonna make it through this. My
yeah.
wisdom is here. And
Mm,
yeah, I maybe I help women do that, but hey, for anyone who identifies as a guy or non-binary, I don't care. You can do this. Your wisdom, it's not just for women, right? You know,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
for anybody to
yeah.
say, "Wow, I have these strengths. I have these capabilities. I have this self-knowledge.
Mhm,
How do
mhm.
I tap into that?
Yeah, I
How
love
do
the
I"
idea that
Yeah,
it's in here, we're
yeah,
always, like, grabbing out here for
yeah.
what do I learn or what do I do?
Mhm.
And I think, it's so cool and important to recognize, like, your body is designed for survival over millions of years, and
Mhm.
so it has to know
Yeah.
intuitively on some level what to do, and so
Mhm.
if you trust it, if you trust
Yeah.
what's happening inside you,
Mhm.
and it doesn't need to be woo-wooey, like you said, it can be
Yeah.
very, like, practical, like, "This
Mhm.
doesn't feel good," in the
Like a
like,
visceral,
whatever
like,
this
when you
is.
feel tight,
Yeah,
that's a sign. When you
yeah,
feel expansive,
yeah.
that's a sign, you
Right,
know? Yeah,
right,
and sometimes they're in the middle.
and every time you're
Yeah,
hanging out with your team, your shoulders are up by your ears and your heart is
exactly.
pounding like crazy, like,
Mhm, mhm.
telling you something,
Hmm,
we're telling you
noted.
something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. We're gonna close out with a couple of,
Yeah,
really great rapid fire questions, but I just feel
cool.
like your wisdom has just so shown through, and I just so
Mm,
appreciate you joining us on this
oh, yeah.
podcast this morning, so
Yeah, I love it. Mhm.
so, first rapid fire question,
Uh-huh.
what is the most random job that you have ever had?
Working at a parking lot at Mount Rushmore in South Dakota.
That is
That's it.
random.
I had to think about that I was like, I've done some random shit, but that
That's
one I'd say is that, yeah.
awesome. That's
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great one. And so the next, rapid fire question is, what is the worst career advice that you have ever gotten?
It's in tandem with, "We're like a family." So,
Ooh.
like, AKA, "Be part of the family," and I'm like, "Ugh," nowadays, that's
Ooh.
red flag.
Yeah.
Don't go.
Families are dysfunctional.
Yeah,
That's
uh-huh,
not
oh,
how
yeah.
this works.
Yep, mhm. Yeah, yeah, "Come join us." Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Nope.
No, thanks. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and
Yeah,
everyone who joined us, thank you so much for joining us.
thank
You can catch us every Thursday live at 8:30 a.m. On the Newly podcast,
you.
where you will continue to get no BS insights on how to grow yourself and grow your career. Don't forget to
Mhm.
subscribe to the channels and share with friends if they might benefit from any of this information. And join me next week at 8:30 a.m. live, where we will be talking again to another wonderful professional that will help you gain some insights on yourself and your carear. Thank you.
Sounds
Have a great
great.
day, everyone.